Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Challengers, starring Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor, directed by Luca Guadagnino. Now, the trailers made this movie look interesting, and what did I feel about this movie? Let's get into it, and you'll see what I'm gonna say if it's realistic or not. Let's get into it. We go back to and forth three different ways as we start off to the third half of the story where Art Donaldson, played by Mike Feist, plays tennis against Patrick Zweig. I don't know if I'm saying that right, please forgive me. Played by Josh O'Connor in the final game against each other, while Art's wife Tashi Duncan, played by Zendaya, is watching, and the year is 2019, and they start to play until we move back 2 weeks earlier with Art waking up after Tashi gets out of the shower and get ready for stretching before a tennis match as his foot is injured. And my critique with this whole movie is make it chronological, as I can't keep track of where we're at in the movie. And my advice to director Luca Guadagnino is tell the story chronological. I mean, oh my god. Tashi watches the tennis match from the day before he pauses it, and by he I mean Art, and we move on to before the tennis match between Art and Patrick, as Tashi believes Patrick is the competition, and they get out of the court, and the score was techno, and I didn't mind that as a choice, as it worked for me for the movie. They once again study the match from the day before his foot is washed out, as Tashi wants his healing so bad until their daughter Lily asks if she could watch a movie called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is a very good choice. And if you saw my review, you'll know why. And Tashi wants to schedule a challenger segment at New Rochelle, Art and someone, and his opponent is none other than Patrick at some point, as he stops at a hotel where he can't pay his hotel room, Patrick, I mean, and the clerk doesn't care who he is, and he can't sleep there at the hotel, so he sleeps in a parking lot at the country club the day before his match against others, while someone who's led to believe he's homeless, whom he doesn't know he's playing at the challenger match. As he goes in the sign in area, as the check in lady tells Patrick a way to make money is to play against his frenemy, Art. And we move on to the match between Art, Patrick, and Patrick, I mean, and Art gets frustrated while Patrick is winning, and we move on to 2006, where they played together as a team and are actually friends. And that's why I brought up frenemies at one point, because they were friends before any of this ever happened. And I remember how rough tennis can be, as this movie rings true to it. And I like these characters as the actors do a good job with their roles, as Zendaya turns in some good work, as we see her play tennis incredibly against a racist bitch named Anna Mueller. I don't know if I'm saying that right, please forgive me. And Mike Feist, whom I reviewed before in the West Side Story remake, and I don't remember him in it, is very good in this movie. And so is Josh O'Connor, who I've seen in Florence Foster Jenkins, the Meryl Streep movie where she can't sing or whatever, and the 2015 Cinderella remake. And this is his best performance, in my opinion, as they go on to a party where Art and Patrick meet Tashi for the first time. And I like the writing in this movie, as it's good written by Jason. Let me see if I'm saying this name right. Kurtzkeys? Something like that. I forget. Please forgive me. And this is so far the best from director Luca Guadagnino's filmography, in my opinion. They catch up and go to the beach, and after Tashi accepts their offer to at going to the beach, the shot after she said yes and moving to the beach was a bit choppy as far as the editing is concerned, but that may be the second critique when it comes to the editing. And I'm going to say this movie, it has some choppy editing at times, but it's not the entire movie. Tashi comes to their hotel room and hangs out with Art and Patrick, and we learn they went to boarding school and learned some things together, as they tell Tashi how Art copied Patrick, as he taught him to jerk off to a girl named Kat Zimmerman, who eventually had to leave because she was never great at tennis. And there were times the dialogue in the scene was uncomfortable for damn sure. They run out of beer, and Tashi sits on the bed and brings up Art and Patrick to kiss her as well as each other. And there's this haunting shot from the trailer as well as this movie where Tashi looked menacing, like this, for example. I can't do it justice, but anyways, which was a fantastic shot, but at the same time, very fucking haunting. And the scene was very weird. Like they were gay for each other, which there's nothing wrong with that. And it doesn't turn out that way. Because remember, in the trailer, they go after Tashi together as she leaves the hotel room. And I was a little grossed out, weirded out. As the next day comes and Tashi watches their match against each other, and Patrick wins, and the game's. And she starts getting her number, and they start dating, and we move on to 2019 at their match where they're frenemies and take a set break as Art is having a hard time, and we move on to a week earlier where Patrick wins a game against Grosu. There's a hell of a lot of graphic male nudity, and he meets with Helen at the hotel where Tashi and Art are staying at as he gets drinks with Helen, and he gets distracted by Tashi, and she goes to the elevator, and Patrick leaves Helen for a second and has a chat with Tashi, and she says to stay the fuck away from her family. And this scene is awkward for damn sure, but the acting is very good as Patrick awkwardly kisses Helen, and we don't see her for the rest of the movie. 13 years earlier, Art and Patrick practice playing tennis together, and we move back and forth to set two of their match. And we move on to 13 years earlier as Tashi is practicing tennis, and the ball comes at the screen like it was in 3D. And this never came out in 3D, I must say, ladies and gentlemen. And Tashi goes to lunch with Art, and as he makes things terribly uncomfortable between each other, as he says Patrick is not in love with her, as she deserves to be loved by someone. And I was thinking, what the fuck is it with this whole going back and forth with 2019 to flashbacks in 2006? As it kind of got annoying to the point I can't follow this movie. Art and Patrick have some churros together after Patrick seeing Art practicing tennis, and Patrick goes to Tashi in her dorm room and have some kind of sexual intercourse, as Patrick and Tashi have some kind of argument that gets aggressive to the point he doesn't come for her tennis match. And she breaks her leg while playing the game as Art witnesses it himself and brings her to the healing room, or should I say the nurse or something, I don't know. And she tells Patrick to get the fuck out, and so does Art, and that's when they break up. And that was a hard scene to watch as Patrick becomes the enemy of Tashi and frenemy of Art at this point in the movie. We move on to 2019 at the match between Art and Patrick as the ball is in while Patrick is led to believe the woman watching the match wants Art's autograph and gets all aggressive with her, and we move back to Tashi and Art playing tennis quite hard at each other until Tashi falls down as she begs Art to not go easy on her until Art gives Tashi a hug as she was stressed out. And again, with the fucking editing. Make the movie chronological, for Christ's sakes. People can't go back and forth with their brains. It's not how it's supposed to work. We move on to 3 years later, and Tashi sees Art playing tennis, and they have some dinner together and start dating as he asks her to become his coach and eventually get married. I don't know. What the hell is this movie supposed to be about? And have a baby of their own, whom I brought up earlier is named Lily. I don't know if I said that, so please forgive me if I said that wrong. And their chemistry is very good by Zendaya, Mike Feist, and Josh O'Connor. And as they leave this restaurant, Tashi and Art start kissing, and someone who works at the restaurant watches them while taking out the trash. And we move on to 2019 where Patrick abuses the tennis racket, and earlier that week wants to talk with Tashi about being his coach, and she slaps him and refuses to tell him and tells him to fucking quit the game as she walks away from him saying no to his face. And this motherfucker has no right to ask Art's wife to be his coach, which is completely unforgivable, like she said at one point in the movie, and gives her his number in case she changes her mind. And I'm thinking, motherfucker, she's not going to change her mind to get back together with your ass, as you're already dating, as you guys already dated at one point. In your history at this point, as we move on to set 3 of the second to final tennis of that match between Art and Patrick, and we move back to 8 years earlier. Jesus. Where Patrick watches Tashi train Art to become a better tennis player, and we move back to that day as it's really fucking windy, and Patrick approaches Art with in a sauna with his dick hanging out as they have a talk about what happened at that one point in Atlanta, and he's disturbed by that story. And hell, I'm disturbed by the story, but I wish this movie didn't go back and forth too much, as it's very unnecessary, but I want to go along with it even better than I am at this point. Art sees Tashi and Patrick sitting together at the restaurant as he gives out an autograph to a lucky fan, and the conversation between Art and Patrick continues in the sauna, and the score goes on the background, and we move on to Tashi and her mother kissing Lily goodnight, and her mother leaves the room as she goes in the bedroom with Art, and he brings up retirement on his part, and he asks about if he can't win against Patrick, will Tashi still love him or not? And I get the impression she's going to say no at this point, as all she wants to talk about is tennis and wants her husband to play the game as he wants to leave. She says it at one point that she will leave him, and after the talk, she texts Patrick to have a talk with him in his car while it's super windy outside, and she asks Patrick for a favor, and she asks him to lose against Art the next day, and they have an argument about how much Patrick is acting like a child while she bets on the game. And I'm not an expert on tennis or any sport whatsoever, but isn't that illegal to bet on tennis like that? Please let me know in the comments below, as he agrees, and she spits on him and kisses Patrick. And I thought, what the fuck is this? As he brings her back to the hotel where she's staying at while we get back to their match, and Patrick loses on purpose and pauses the game as they play rather intensely, to a point Patrick tried to serve like Art does, and Art says fuck off and continues to play the game, as I did like we get the ball's point of view at one point, and they get closer and closer to each other's front end of the court. And Art does win while he and Patrick hug it out, and the movie ends like that. And I thought, really? With the guessing game of an ending? As I'm not a fan of it unless there's a reason for it, and this movie doesn't have it whatsoever. But the climax was good, but not great in my opinion. Now it's time for my rating. I'll give this movie a 6.2 out of 10. This is so far director Luca Guadagnino's best work in his filmography, in my opinion, as I like the 3 main characters as they have chemistry, and Zendaya turns in some good work, and Mike Weiss and Josh O'Connor are very good in this movie, and the editing was a bit choppy at times, but not the entire time, but I did like when the tennis ball coming at the screen a few times. Like, the movie is the movie in 3D, but luckily it was never released in 3D. There were times the writing was uncomfortable, while other times the writing was pretty good, and there's some good shots throughout the movie, as it can get awkward at sometimes. And the shots are very good, like I said, and it goes back and forth to the point it was annoying me for half the movie. I liked the movie, but I wish I loved it, as there were some issues with the editing. And despite there's some fantastic performances, and this is director Luca Guadagnino's best work, in my opinion, but I was a little disappointed at the way it went back and forth unnecessarily. And this is a recommendation, but I want to be clear on that. But there are problems with the movie at times, but at the end of the day, I did like it. I wish I loved it, but I didn't. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and when I ever get back to Luca Guadagnino's filmography, come on, let's play some tennis.